exclusive benefits like discounts on thousands of items, special savings for seniors, instant deals, quarterly rebates, plus an extra up to 2% off every quarter. Shop more, save more, and more only at Builders Paradise. Don't miss out. Start building your rewards today with Value Club at Builders Paradise, because every bolt, board, and brush brings you closer to bigger, better savings. Terms and conditions apply.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of Thought That Get Results. I'm Webbo Herbert, and as per usual, we're here every Tuesday evening with something that at least we think is of community interest and or of some concern. And if you think that you have something which fits into that category, you'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program, well, why don't you drop us a line, address it to a Let's Talk program in K.O. Vaughan Radio, P.O. Box 195, Charlestown, New Nevis. So give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion in regard to your participation in the show. Call in on the numbers listed 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. You can get a pencil, piece of paper, write down your comment or your question so that when you get on the show, you take as little time as possible so that we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, respect yourselves and then respect others, because we'll not accept anything we deem that's not within our broadcast standards, but we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. Again, thank you all for joining us. This is your voice in the community, talk that get results. By the way, you can also follow our live video stream of this program on our YouTube channel, Vaughan Radio. Click subscribe, our Facebook page at Vaughan Radio. Thank you all again for joining us this evening. Tonight, Conrad Naya-Liebert, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to your hard-working staff here at the Powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean. To my colleagues, good evening to you both. Can I say not too regular, but quite also members of the bigger, of the wider community of Vaughan Radio, I suppose. Welcome you guys. To my friends in Toronto who are always in tune with us in some way or the other, and my brethren in Connecticut and Florida, I say good evening to you guys. Webbo, thank you for requesting my presence once again. And of course, I think there's quite much to be discussed this evening. And as you know, Webbo, how much I like to be a part of the national debate and such conversations that sometimes, people see you in sometimes a very good light and sometimes not such a good light. But I'm always like to be a part of the conversation, whether it's culture, whether it's economics, politics, or otherwise. So thank you again, Webbo, for having me, and I certainly look forward to a healthy debate this evening. Thank you.
Glendale Herbert, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo. It's always a pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure to at least address the folks out there in the diaspora and here in Nevis and St. Kitts and throughout, the region. Webbo, there are some major issues that are confronting us right here in the homeland here in Nevis. I think they're critical to our future as we move forward. And certainly, I'm always happy to be here when these matters arise in terms of giving opinions and giving shape, somehow being a part of the discussion as to the way forward. Hopefully we'll be able to at least give some information in detail as to our perspective as to what's happening around here on the island, and at least what are the latest cutting-edge issues that are meaningful to the people, and meaningful not only to the people but also meaningful for the larger, perspective of growth of the country.
The Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to my colleagues. Good evening to the Bond Radio family. I wish to say a pleasant good evening to all those tuned into the Let's Talk program this evening. Those here in Nevis, St. Kitts, and as well as those who are overseas, I would bid everyone a pleasant good evening. Just a few housekeeping matters, Mr. Herbert. I have not been on the radio for a long time, so I'm happy to be able to be a part of the discussion this evening. I wish to extend happy birthday greetings to all those who are celebrating a birthday or anniversary today or perhaps during the week. I also wish to express my profound gratitude and appreciation to all those who extended happy anniversary greetings to myself and my husband. We celebrated our 17th year anniversary last week, Saturday, and a number of persons did pour out to show their appreciation, and I wish to just say a very special thank you to all those who did so. I also wish to extend congratulations to all those students who recently received their results, who undertook the CSEC examinations, and whether you were very successful or you were not so successful, I wish to say congratulations to you, and those who were not so successful, you perhaps have an opportunity to have another go at it. So I wish everyone well. On that same token, I wish also to extend condolences to all those families who may be grieving the loss of a loved one during this time. I wish to extend condolences on behalf of myself and my family and the entire St. Thomas's constituency to the family of Uletta Seabrooks there in Cotton Ground. And I just hope that the family may find comfort in the bosom of God during this difficult time, Webbo. So indeed, very happy to be here.
And the fellows didn't say it, but let me say how good it is to have you as usual.
Thank you.
They're dropping the ball. Anyway, so that's just... So, let me just say a very special good evening to Ted Hobson. Always let you know that we got you. And let me go straight off and go to the panel and see what we got.
Well, Webbo, to get the ball rolling, I think the hottest issue in the country right now seems to be the special sustainability zone. That piece of legislation, the act that was passed in the House in St. Kitts, in the Federal House in St. Kitts sometime last week. It created a lot of consternation, of course, and a big talking point throughout the country. As it's a matter that relates to lands, and lands happens to be something that is very important to the people, particularly in Nevis. I can speak to that. And Nevisians hold on to lands, and they have a very close affinity and an emotional reaction as it relates to lands. Historically, that has been the way we've responded as it relates to matters of land. The land issue has resulted in our political outcomes throughout, from the beginning of our history as it relates to our politics, so-called party politics in this country. Going back to the 1960s, I put these things in perspective as it relates to how lands has affected the politics. There was first, of course, we remember the UNM party with Walwyn. That ended, of course. The matter of lands was a critical matter in how that reign ended in Nevis. I'm always reminded how politics goes on here in Nevis. Politics starts out, most of our politics in terms of party politics starts as a movement in the sense that to bring relief to Nevis and Nevisians in terms of the St. Kitts Nevis question and in terms of treatment of Nevis. And that started out with UNM. His cry was, of course, for secession. And his cry, the Nevisian people went towards him because there were the inequities and incongruities that existed between St. Kitts and Nevis in terms of what Nevis got out of the deal. His, like I said, political career ended because of lands was one of the major things that ended that. The NRP, of course, gained relevance in 1970-71 because, again, the same idea, fighting on the behalf of Nevis and inequities perceived by the Nevian people, of course, and that also, that's how the party got its prominence. That party first major reign in the question of lands surrounded that as well in 1992. Again, I always remind people again, the CCM won in 1992. CCM did not come aboard, in my opinion, as the party that hinged on the idea of the focus on inequities, so to speak, such as the NRP and the UNM. But I would say by the time 1996 to 1998 came around, when they called for a referendum, they had arrested that mantle away from the NRP in terms of being a nationalist party, in terms of separation, calling 113. And droves of people moved to the CCM as a result of that. So that is always a cornerstone in the history, but that reign also ended with 80 acres in 2006. And to put things into further perspective, on and again, this has always been the case. Now we have the SSZ, which is called the special sustainable zone, and that is a question now. We remember 2015, that reign ended in the federal house, that ended with land, the same thing again, lands for debt swap. So it's always been a critical issue to end political careers. So it is I always ask politicians to know the history of your country, know the history of the people, and understand it, because it can be a critical issue going forward.
Well, certainly, as Mr. Herbert said, the issue has been front and center quite recently. A few people asked me about it, and it prompted me to actually listen into the Prime Minister's speech about the SSZ, the Sustainable Development Area, which they spoke of. I'm still trying my utmost best, to be quite honest, to make sense of it. I'm open to be enlightened by my colleagues here this evening. I'm still trying to see it in reality, functional on Nevis, because as far as I check, the smaller the land space, the more impact it would have on the people, and of course there is an era of suspiciousness that seems to be alive here on the island about lands in the south. Rightly so. And for those who feel like people should not be suspicious or skeptic about it, I think they are thinking that we are dead and unaffected, impervious kind of people, like we don't care about our country and the lands and the way government and others are dealing with it. So I think the skepticism that seems to be all around us today about the land in the south is rightly placed. And is not to be shut down simply. Is simple. And I suppose and with the passing of this legislation, I think it adds a little bit more to it. And because by nature the legislation is as such that it seems to me that, as I said before, the smaller the land space, the more it would impact negatively, and to see it function in reality is quite something. Seems to me a distant thunder from my point of view, and probably more workable in thinkers. Examples has been drawn, put forward. I think the Prime Minister spoke of Panama. I believe he made reference to, is it the Panama Canal he was talking about when he makes reference to such zone and the profit and the economic benefit it has accrued for Panama and some other distant country that have millions and millions of people with millions and millions of square miles, it looks like. And so seeing it functional in our little space I cannot see through it, and as I say, I'm open to be enlightened about it, and of course that makes me feel like the legislation have an ulterior motive to it, and I think that have increased the skepticism in a big way, really, because as we know, that lands has been under the authority of the Nevis Land and Housing Association. That's the name of the institution. For a while now, and I wonder if the legislation is mostly geared towards reducing that control that the island administration have on land, and increasing the control that the federal government may have on land, and that is something would not sit well with Nivision. It looks like that's a step towards making the island administration more irrelevant, and it is my prophecy, if we don't be careful, the island administration can end up as a serious liability to the federal government, and its presence would be quite irrelevant, and just to me consuming money and that could be used otherwise. And so there's this pull and push involving this legislation, hence the atmosphere today here in Nevis as it relates to the land in the south, as it relates to control of the Nevis assets, as it relates to our resource, which of course everybody knows the geothermal would fall underneath that what could I say, that heading. I suppose those who control lands have a rightful control, a right to control the geothermal, and those who control land also control what beneath the land, I suppose. And so the skepticism is one of it's rightly placed, and I think a good explanation is expected. I think question was asked. The Premier said he knows nothing about any big deal happening in the South. But I think that the people are not settled with that response, and such. So the skepticism seems to be growing. I suppose I'll have more to say in a minute or two.
Yes, Webbo. Just to weigh in, I think, as Naya quite rightfully said, there's a lot of, I would perhaps say, uneasiness about the whole idea of the special sustainability zone and the whole land issue. And I think what is perhaps causing that anxiety and somewhat uneasiness is lack of awareness and perhaps lack of education. I think a lot of times we see a lot of movements taking place in Nevis, and a lot of it is just somewhat hearsay, shoo-shoo, but the powers that be not really coming out and addressing the issue or making the public aware as to what are the intentions, if it is that we have investors who are interested in developing the southern side of the island, and perhaps, there should be greater awareness to the public by way of information as to what are the intentions, what are the plans. And with the lack of that, the lack of information, it creates anxiety. It put people, make people uneasy. It gives them discomfort because, of course, everyone wants to know, and that is the big question, what is taking place. Last week, the federal government in the national parliament passed a piece of legislation. I think there has been discussions in Parliament as well as in the public arena pertaining to the sustainability agenda, the development goals, and the government trying to achieve the goal of getting to a sustainable state. And so this is part, I believe, of that broader agenda where we are now looking at putting some legislative framework in place when it comes to dealing with resources, and especially economic resources, and land is one of the major economic resources, because of course we all know we cannot have any development without actually having land, access to land. And so I believe that one of the issues, are what perhaps would have been more meaningful, is if the government, the stakeholders, perhaps investors, persons from the private sector who has an interest in these particular developments, if there were some education beforehand, just to educate people and give them that sense of awareness as to the intentions of any development that is likely to take place in the future. I think we don't know a lot about what's taking place on the south side. We don't know the intentions. What we do know is that there have been a number of persons who own land, and I must say that the majority of the lands in that particular area in the vicinity from Long Point to Saddle Hill, they are privately owned lands, and we know that a number of persons have been approached by different persons and made offers to sell their land. And so the question then becomes, well, why? Why should I sell my land? You know, what is taking place? What is happening? The Premier, as Naya has said, indicated that he has not had any formal proposal from any investor who has any desire or intention to put any project in that particular area. But again, despite his comments, I note that he used the word formal, but I believe that there has been perhaps some informal discussions, and that is the reason why we are seeing this particular activity taking place, where a number of persons are being approached to purchase land. Another thing that perhaps came to my mind when I listened to the debate in the National Assembly or the National Parliament was perhaps if the legislative framework and the special sustainability zone authorization bill, if it had anything to do with geothermal. As we know, the government are now taking strategic steps to have alternative forms of energy. And so I was wondering if perhaps there was a link. The government is now looking at specific areas that may be designated as special zones for energy or ecotourism or whatever have you. But again, all of these are speculations, because there's no clear guidance or anybody who was forthcoming in terms of saying exactly what is taking place, and particularly to the island of Nevis.
What I've discerned is by looking at I've looked at the legislation and read it through at least twice, 2.5 times at least, for the, and what's in there speaks volumes in my mind. The legislation speaks towards some call it an enclave, but the same, potato, the same thing. You can have, it speaks to that they'll have their own laws, right, that would be negotiated between the sitting government, the NIA, here in Nevis, or in the federal government in St. Kitts. And the NIA would negotiate with the developer the set of laws that they're governed by. Now, in addition to that, they will be responsible for health. They will be responsible for security, police. They will be responsible for fire. They will be responsible for electricity to the tune of 70%. And 70% of the electricity used in that enclave would have to be produced based on the legislation, the act. And in addition to that, they are also would have access to the to the marine, what do you call that, the seabed, leasing of the seabed up to 99 years, and can get it beyond 99 years if they wish. Now, if you understand the minimum amount of lands that's allotted to this special SSZ zone is 500 acres in Nevis. And in St. Kitts is 750 acres. Now, Anbas owns 600 acres. I just putting things in perspective so we can clearly understand what we're saying. And if it's 500 acres is the minimum, they can buy 1,000 acres and marginalize. Now, they're going to have their own laws. They can settle their own court matters because the legislation speak towards that inside the enclave. Okay, so you can ask, is this an apartheid move? Because who are able to go in there and live in there, in that enclave? Remember, they can have marinas dotted across the coastline on the southern line because they can lease the seabed for 99 years. In the legislation, it says that. Right? So the point here is you've divulged or you've given away, you sold 500, 1,000 acres of this land, which 500 acres accrues to about 2.2 miles. 1,000 acres is almost 4 miles of land, square miles. Right? And the people of Nevis would never see those lands again. Now, I said to a friend of mine, my friend, that, in the last 75 years, going from 1950 to 2025, Nevis has regressed or has lost wealth. You see people driving around in cars, fancy cars, and they got houses dotted throughout the country. But they're all mortgaged. They're all owned by the banks. Nevis has lost a tremendous amount. We are worse off in terms of generational wealth than we were 50, 40 years ago. And people don't understand what I'm saying. Case in point, land for debt swap, we had to put up X amount of thousands or hundreds and hundreds of acres to leverage the debt that we owe in St. Kitts, to the federal government owed abroad, to National Bank, and with National Bank. If you have lands, you can leverage your lands. When we are landowners in Nevis, most of us, we can leverage that against the bank and get equity cash. So you're wealthy, independent, you're not credited, meaning you don't have a house. A house you have to upkeep, you have to pump money into it. If you don't put money into it, it diminishes in value. Land's always accrued. I don't care if you have shrub on it, I don't have your cashew tree in it, it doesn't matter, they're always up in value over time. And all these lands that we've divested ourselves from, meaning sold, over the years, with all these people who come in and do that, they're buying it from us, so we're less wealthy. It's just simple. If you look around the country, you understand. But so don't mind the trappings that you look at, the house and the car and what. You're mortgaged to the hilt. You're not wealthy. You don't have generational wealth that we used to create in this country for years. Even our business owners created generational wealth. When they die, their families now can continue the slacks, the this, the that, on and on. Right? My point is, how is this going to help in creating general wealth in the country? Now, if you create the sustainable zone, and people are living in it, they have their own included, they have their own laws. Maybe they can have carrying laws, meaning gun laws, they can all have their own guns. They can walk around how they want, right? Inside there. I'm asking the simple question, when my friends or whomever got to go work, or do landscaping, or they go clean, or going to the enclave, go do all these sort of things, right? And all this sort of, and something is done in there. What laws govern them? You understand? You see what we are creating in this country?
I think, if I may, Mr. Herbert, because I think we need to really put things into perspective, because you're giving the idea or impression that by having a zone, it's going to be a different sovereign state to the island of Nevis or the island of St. Kitts, and that is certainly not the spirit of the legislation. Of course, in other countries, for example, in Malta, even in the United States, in Miami, there are certain designated areas for residency. We don't know if it's going to be for residential purpose. The fact is, we don't really know what the development really is about. But I did not get the idea from reading the legislation that by saying that they are going to have their own laws, that they are going to have laws that are independent, or rules that are independent to the existing laws of St. Kitts and Nevis. Certainly that would be outrageous, and the legislation clearly stated that there must be proposals, there must be agreement, and both the cabinet, if it is in St. Kitts, the government, the cabinet, the national cabinet has to approve whatever plans or whatever development. Same thing for Nevis. The NIA must be able to approve these things. So it's not are perhaps not fair to say that this is going to happen and spin it so negative. You mentioned that they may have laws and they may have their own guns, but they may also build churches, you know? So I don't think that it is fair for us to always have a negative connotation when it comes to land and land development. Of course, I do appreciate that it is indeed a very sensitive issue, it is a passionate issue, but at the same time we have to ask ourselves that if it is that we intend to move forward with diversifying our economy, if it is that we intend to have sustainable growth and development, how can we do so without putting the necessary mechanism in place? And unfortunately, in order for us to do so, we need resources. We must have access to resources in order for investors to come and invest in Nevis, and that is what we really want them to do, because we are focusing our economic agenda. We want to be able to create jobs and really increase the standard of living for our people. Now, in order for us to do that,
Cleon, could I just get someone weighing in on the discussion, and we'll get back to you. Good evening.
Yes.
Thank you for holding. Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening.
You're on the air. Could you go ahead?
Listen, we are accustomed to sit down at night time and watch the cricket, right? All of a sudden, they cut off the channel them. Even you're paying money for the channel and cut them off. So you can't get to see the cricket no longer. I am saying that this is wrong. I don't know who dealing with this thing. I don't know who is representing the people in Nevis. But wherever you turn, Fluff and Digicel cut off all the sport channel them that we watch the cricket on, so we can't see the cricket no more. And you know the bad thing about it? People paying for them same channel there, because I am paying for them. So I really don't know who I represent us. I don't know if the government got anything to do with it. You think it's an Nevis or who? But this thing is wrong, and it is highway robbery. Because if we don't pay the bill, they cut you off. And if you pay for the channel them, then they're going to call the customer off.
yes.
Hello?
Yes, caller. I'm trying to see whether or not any member of the panel would like to address your concern.
Somebody needs to deal with it, you know, because this is highway robbery. Because you can't be paying for these channels and then cut you off. You can't be paying for them and then cut you off. Me put on my TV go watch cricket tonight and me can't watch cricket because they cut me off. And everybody who me know on both TV, who I call, said they won't cut off too.
Okay. All right. Let's see if any person on the panel.
Well, that's unfair. If you watch cricket 2 days ago on the same TV, the same month, and all of a sudden you and your neighbors and everybody else can't watch TV, there's something wrong there. Somebody's trying to make some money out of what is going on with the cricket or the increase, viewers, for the cricket matches, and that is almost like the same thing we're talking about here. I mean, Glendale have its own interpretation of the legislation, and he's being asked not to be so negative, but to me, it looks like when you give somebody an inch to take a yard, and sometimes a mile sometimes, and then you have to wonder who is representing us, and what is the real issue here. Next thing, the government and them gone to courts, and sometimes the government have to leave things because too much money is at stake, and the prospect of huge business and employment and meeting these standards come into effect. So we got to be mindful. We truly got to be mindful. With this 500 acre, well, how much zone there can be if 500 acre is the least in terms of land space these people would be taking up? I mean, in a little place like Nevis, the CCM sold 700 acres. That's from Penny's Beach to way up in the mountain. I mean, we will never see much of that, it seems like. Now they're putting things in place where the lease, 500 acres, I do understand the idea of trying to attract, investors, and so forth. So I suppose someone who wants to come in and say open a diesel something, which is deemed to be highly, not too good for the environment. So where are they going to put that person, really?
Beats me.
We're not going to put that person that to effectuate his idea. He's going to create employment. He's going to government's going to able to earn revenue from it. Such revenue might be used to improve education, which is part of the sustainable development. And that such revenue might be used for health purpose, which is also part of the sustainable development.
And the footprint, the footprint is doesn't even require 100 acres or 50 acres of land.
Good.
For a lot of these things. The point, I have a lot of. Fine. My colleague here, Cleon, said that I might be fearful. I can't be relaxed because
and it's natural.
Hear me out. I can't be relaxed when there is no clarity. I know you have to weigh the options and the plausibility and the possibility of all the options that are before us. And absent of any clarity, these are the prospects. And absence of anyone going down this road with experience who are at the helm or at leading this charge, I can't wish for it. I can't necessarily say I have the confidence and say it would not turn out in many of these ways. It has happened many times over in the world. And I don't know anywhere around here in our region where there is a sustainable, the special sustainable zone. I know they have one in Dubai, but of course Dubai has a king, has all that, and they can pierce through the laws of that sustainable zone, meaning the power of the monarchy. So I don't know of that. I don't know the experience. We have never run this course before. It is very, and without clarity, we have to sound the alarm, because for those who are in charge of running this thing, they need to be aware of all the permutations that are possible.
Yes.
But I do think, Mr. Herbert, because we have to understand, and I can appreciate and understand the uneasiness, as I said before, and it's natural whenever you're going into something that is completely new. It's natural to be fearful, and as you quite correctly said, with the absence of knowing, being aware, okay, it does create that level of discomfort, and I can appreciate it. But we have to bear in mind that this particular legislation is being passed against a particular backdrop. So it is not something that is just taken out of the sky. It is something that has to do with the government, and that is the powers that be, the persons who the people elected in order to govern them, and who hold basically proxy in order to charge this particular agenda. And so they would have looked at the legislation, they have experts looking at it, and they came up with a policy, and they are creating the legislative framework now to put that policy in place. And I don't want people to get the impression that I am defending. I am just saying that there's a lot of hysteria that is taking place in St. Kitts and Nevis, perhaps Nevis more so right now, and I think it has to do with the absence of knowledge and our people being aware and educated, so that they can have the confidence to appreciate that even if this is something new, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is something that is harmful or it is something that is dangerous for us. It can be something that can be very good. It can be something that is sustainable. One of the things that I note from the legislation, and I must say I have not been able to read the gazetted legislation. I don't think it has been gazetted as yet. So what I read was, I think I listened to the debate in Parliament and I read the draft of the bill. And so the spirit of it is that even though there is this special zone, this special area, this designated area, the control is really still within the hands of the government. And so I don't want people to get the idea that this is something that is going to be in isolation to St. Kitts and Nevis, because of course before anything can be done, and Naya, you mentioned the example of someone perhaps wanting to create a diesel plant or development. Again, these things must be approved and they must be in keeping with our pillars of sustainable development and that whole agenda in keeping with the sustainable development goal agenda. So it is important for us to know that this is not something that is in isolation. It is not something that just pop up. It is something that had a lot of deliberate thought, expertise, and advice. And there are areas throughout the world where people designate particular areas for access to land. And I must say that these are not, from my understanding, on the south side, that is from Long Point to Saddle Hill, these are not crown lands, these are private lands. And the first step would have been for these persons to have negotiations with landowners who are free to deal and treat with their land as they please. Some persons have decided that they will sell their lands because they have them over there for years and they have not developed them and they have no use for them. Other persons have said, listen, I'm not sure what is taking place and I wish to hold on to my land. But of course, that is their constitutional right. If they own land, they can do whatever they please. You know, we live in a democratic society. If they wish to sell, they can sell. So I think the uneasiness is really coming from the lack of knowing, and this is why it is important for stakeholders to really have discussions. But when I say that very cautiously, because we have a history right here in Nevis where once a project is announced, certain pillars within the society, they go on what I will coin as an agenda to create anxiety and alarm and somewhat cause harm to investors, where sometimes people may change their mind from investing in Nevis. And so I think there must be a mature approach to this. I can understand and appreciate the fear, but at the same time, it cannot be all negative, all dull and gloom. We have to be able to look at it and say, okay, what is the spirit of the legislation? What are the intentions of the government? What are the intentions of even the private stakeholders who wish to invest? And how can this be beneficial to Nevisians? Because what if by us taking this footprint and taking perhaps a leadership role and a leadership example and being somewhat leading the charge in terms of this type of economic diversification, what if this can bring some significant benefit to the people of Nevis? Glendale mentioned earlier about generational wealth, and sometimes, yes, we often think that land ownership would bring us some sort of generational wealth, but if you have the land you're sitting down and it's not being developed and you're not earning revenue or income from it, I'm not sure how much of a generational wealth you're developing from that. And so these are things that, you know, we can have discussions about and debates and all of that, but it is important to note, and I do call on the powers that be now perhaps to give some kind of guidance to the people of Nevis as to what are the intentions as it relates to the south side, the development. For years, I think a number of persons, political parties, both NRP and CCM, has given different ideas about developing the south side of Nevis. I remember back in the day, NRP, one of the agenda that they were looking at really was a port, a deep water port over in that area. Some persons, I remember that the fuel storage plant, there were some plans for that within that particular designated area. And again, a number of persons have had ideas. What is important is that we can all agree that throughout our history, a number of persons, political parties, different people, different stakeholders have seen the economic benefit from that particular area. And we continue to hold steadfast towards that. Now, the development might be taking a different form and shape, in the form of something that is perhaps new to us and something that we are not accustomed to. But again, I said, not because we're not accustomed to something and it is completely new to us, doesn't mean that we should go on the all negative. What we should demand from our leaders is awareness, education and information, and that is very, very important, because I do believe that if it is that people are going to sell their lands to an investor, that they perhaps should actually have some idea as to, if they care, and again, if they care to, that they should have some idea as to, you know, what those lands would be used for. But again, that is a matter of negotiation between the individual landowners and the investors. So I'm just saying that, you know, before we go all dull and gloom, because a number of persons have already invested and they have looked at this scheme and thought that, okay, there's nothing wrong with this particular agreement or them selling their land for that particular purpose, but it depends.
We can't double talk, you know. If the government or anybody, the people who are pushing this, pushing this through, have not informed the public, how can they possibly inform a seller? It makes no sense, because the seller is in the public. So the seller don't even know what they're selling for to start with. My point is, again, you know, I mean, listen. There's no do-overs when it comes to this. We have one bite at the apple and that's it. You got to know where we're going with this. And if there's no clarity, I just don't get the point. There is no do-overs. You got to get it right. And if you are a generational person in Nevis, or your family has been, and you have people who are coming behind you, young folks or your kids, you got to make the securities decision, the right decisions. You got to be able to glean all the information you can, and there is none. Frankly, there is none.
Can we afford to lose an investor here on island, on Nevis? I don't know much about St. Kitts, but can we afford to lose an investor here? Are we saying that a likely investor or the preferred investor would be one who conforms to the Sustainable Development Goals, or suppose that
Naya, let me just add this person to the conversation and let you continue. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert. How are you, sir?
I'm well, and you?
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Okay, I just want to add my 2 cents in the discussion that's going on this evening. We are talking about the same development on the south side of Nevis. But if I could remember clearly, maybe about maybe a month to maybe 5 weeks ago, there was a town hall meeting in Gingerland when a citizen asked a question to the premier about that same piece of that development, that whatever coming to Nevis. And the premier said publicly he had no idea what you are talking about. He said he had no idea about that investment. So if the premier, the leader of our country, can openly say that to us, tell me what comfort he will give to us as Nevisians. And all of a sudden, 5 weeks after, you're telling me that the premier should have come to us, the powers that be should say things, but the premier already said that he have nothing, he have no idea about this development. The leader of our country says that openly at a town hall meeting. So please, honestly, as a Nevisian, I just need to understand what is happening, because trust me, somebody's fooling somebody. I try to fool somebody. I will continue to listen, sir. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Naya?
Well, I'm not very far away from the caller's feeling, really, because it looks to me like, of course, we have created, what can I say, we are trying to create infrastructure, economic infrastructure, if that makes sense. But we don't know for what purpose at this point. Because there seems to be no real intention of a particular investment taking place on the south side. And so we are creating an economic infrastructure in the hope that we would find, or some investor would be comforted by the fact that we have this legislation in place.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good night to you, Webbo, and your panelists. The last caller. He make me smile because I wonder if it's the first time he saw those things, that things happening, and the people at the top don't know nothing about it. That's all I wanted to say.
So an investor will be comforted due to the fact that we have this legislation in place. But I'm still a bit confused as to seeing it really work, seeing it effectuated in Nevis, based on the spirit of the legislation, really. And that's why I asked the question: can we afford to turn back an investor? And whether or not an investor, if he or she is not doing that kind of business that deems from the outset sustainable, if he or she would be refused or placed in a different area. Because to me, we are looking investors. To me, an investor would do a lot of the things that would contribute indirectly to the sustainable goals, even if that investor is not really doing that from the outset. That seems to be a business carrying that sustainable goal nature. So it looks to me like, as the situation stands here in Nevis and how the economy runs here in Nevis, and what it seems to be like a serious lack of funds here in Nevis, can we refuse an investor? I don't really see this working in its full implication in Nevis pretty easily, to be quite honest. The idea of, I can't believe there can be a zone in Nevis that have its own police. So I'm not sure that I can consume that. I mean, its own security, I could understand. But to say its own police? I hear its own court system? Is that for real?
Settle disputes, it says here. I'm reading it.
Well, it seems like, and Cleon is asking for clarification by the authorities coming forward and saying things, but how much they can say, if especially on the local front, if they don't know, has has no idea of any business or company wants to do anything on the south side. I'm still sitting here hoping to really deduce from my colleague sense out of this sustainable zone in reality and its workings in Nevis. I'm still on about that.
I think because you mentioned like the court system and settling disputes, and of course if you have a zoned area where they have bylaws and things that govern how those people occupy the space, there's nothing wrong with them having an authority to settle dispute should a dispute arise. We have those in condos and different designated areas within Nevis that exist already. So what it is not necessarily meaning that you have a court system that is going to supersede your existing jurisdictional courts. It just means that you may have a body, an authority, or mechanism in place that deals with disputes that arise within that particular area and that is sensitive to those issues. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. No, okay. I just want to put
nothing wrong with that. You'll go on to the next point. Okay, I was trying to get someone else in, but go ahead, finish up.
Yeah, I just wanted to just put out a disclaimer because I noticed that the legislation was passed and automatically we went straight to what is taking place in the south part of Nevis. Okay? Now, I am not certain if there is a connection. I have not heard anything publicly from any government official, neither the NIA nor the federal government, that say that there is a part, this legislation is in keeping with this particular project. But we somehow went straight into that. Now, when I first heard and watched the debate in Parliament, my mind went to geothermal, because that is what is on the table, and I was thinking that, you know, based on the entire project and the whole residual activity that will take place from geothermal, that perhaps they were looking at having special zone and designated areas, protected areas to deal with that. My mind didn't necessarily go over to the, you know, what is taking place and the offer for land over in thing. And it could be a number of things, like I said, but without any concrete information, I'm not sure if it makes sense at this point to create any type of anxiety unless we have, as the caller correctly said, some concrete information from the powers that be.
I'm going to have a question for the panel on that same thing that you're mentioning, but let's take this first. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening. I'm getting the impression, and it may not be my intention, but the impression that the lady on the panel is saying that we're crying wolf. But that is exactly the problem. She mentioned the fact that, well, the legislation, the spirit of the legislation might not be such that we should be concerned. But in the absence of information, as she noted herself, what are we to do? We would have to press pause, because the implications of this, and as the Premier himself noted, if it's good if it is done right, and he repeated that several times. But what if it's wrong? And that is why we should be extra cautious in our approach to this, right? And the mere fact that she herself seemed to have to call for more information is itself a red flag, okay? And the thing is, why this method? Of course, we have to diversify. Of course, we welcome foreign direct investment. But why this? Why like this? Because we have been attracting foreign investment since independence. Okay. But what is the model they're going after? I mean, they mentioned, for instance, everybody was gushing about Dubai. Do the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis want to be like Dubai? What makes them so sure if there hasn't been consultation? Can it be that 11 wise men just get up and decide, well, this is what it's going to be, without consulting the rest of the country, if it's as transformative as it's billed to be, right? Who says we want a whole set of gated communities, like in Florida, right? We have a model here in Frigate Bay, for instance, where you do have foreign investment, but you also have local investment. And the mix that's provided here, I think, has worked well as an economic model. It's one of the breadwinners. That area is one of the breadwinners of the country. Okay? What's wrong with that model? Why do we need to go to this model that is can be fraught with a lot of problems? And bear in mind the size of the properties involved. That just seems like we can set ourselves on a path where there is no return. Once the deal is done, it's done. And my main thrust is I do not trust these representatives to do the right thing. I trust them to do the right thing, to get reelected, to maintain power. But I don't think, I honestly, based on past records, I honestly don't think they're thinking 20, 50 years down the road. Right? I'm sorry. I just don't have confidence that in them to do the right thing. And that's the bottom line. Okay? It should not be up to just these men to decide the future of the country. Right? It should be a much more broader discussion on this and involving more stakeholders before we plunge our country into this new direction. Who says we want to change the complexion of our country? Right? There's so many things to this that you absolutely have to get right. Right? And incidentally, it was, I think, Eric Evelyn who may have given an idea of thinking behind this too, when he said that, well, now we have opportunities for foreign direct investment because the government, both of them, both the NIA and federal government, were under scrutiny for not being able to attract investment. And so one wonders if there wasn't, that's the reason why there wasn't this haste to do something like this, as well as, I think it might have been Brantley who said, well, it was very important to get out the stables first, right, with this before others in the region do it. Okay, pretty much like what was done with the FDI. With those kinds of pressures, one wonders if enough thought and feasibilities and all studies and all of that went into what is being done here. Okay, that's the concern, right? We're not convinced that there, and the words guardrails was mentioned in the debate as well. We're not convinced that the guardrails that are there are adequate to protect future generations. Okay, then.
Okay, thank you. Who did I... Was it Cleon?
Yes, I take the views of the caller. I do understand and appreciate. Like I said, you know, I am very sensitive and I can appreciate people's anxiety and somewhat, you know, lack of confidence in the approach. But at the same time, the caller mentioned something that I find quite intriguing. He said that he do not trust the persons at the head who is in charge of leading the country. I guess to make certain decisions. Again, you know, that is the whole point of you having elections and participating in a democratic process. At the end of the day, people are elected to lead, and that's what they have to do. That is their duty, that is their job. What we can and only hope and appreciate that those who are elected and charged with that responsibility, that they would always act in the best interest of the people.
And sometimes in consultation too, right?
And sometimes in
consultation. Okay, let me take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Webbo, good night. I'm back again. Did I hear your last caller say the government wasn't attractive enough to invest in foreign investment? That he is a strong supporter of this government, the present government administration. They said they had investors waiting for them to get in power. So what he's talking about now, I don't get that. And they're not now capable enough to attract them when they were waiting on them. I wonder if I'm hearing right. So he could call back and say what he needs. Thank you very much.
The call seems to emphasize a situation where the governments haven't been able to attract foreign investors, and with this new instrument, they hope to achieve that infrastructure, I suppose, that would make it easier for them to attract foreign investment. I know here in Nevis there has been a talk going around. I mean, we have not been seeing much foreign investment taking place in Nevis over the last 20 years. Maybe Sinkits have been seeing some. And as the caller said, that Minister Eric Evelyn hailed the new legislation because people have been saying.
St. Kitts have been seeing some now, you said?
I say maybe.
Okay, so you're not sure either.
No,
but you're sure Nevis hasn't been attracting any.
I have not been seeing much of that type of activities here on island.
No. Just to,
yeah,
I like to. I mean, this to me always brings it in perspective. And when we look at Tower Hill, from above Foreign Hill area there, all the way to
Fountain,
600 acres, right?
Yes.
We're talking this one here is a minimum of 5, could be 1,000. Imagine the Nevis, the footprint. And you have special communities of 1,000 acres, you know, that sort of thing. I mean, we can go, we're not locked in. And my point is, is this the only way we can go? The footprint is just too ominous. For a small 36 square mile island, with inhabitants such as you and I, and Cleon and Webbo. Maybe I'm a little bit off the rails, but I'm going to stay off the rails on this one because I do believe I'm right in terms of development. You want a nice mix in terms of development, and the footprints can be smaller, right? I just think it's just too humongous. I just don't see a Nevis that I grew up in, my parents or any one of us grandparents did, and in the future if this ever happens. And the way the legislation speaks, I just don't see it. And I'm not comfortable with it, to be frank with you. There's not enough clarity there. And I even question the authority of the legislation anyway in Section 9, Part 5, Section 9, that speaks towards the NIA. Pursuant to Section 37(3) of the Constitution, Nevis Island Administration has consented to act insofar as it applies to its authority on the island of Nevis. Now, section, right, you follow that?
Yeah.
The Constitution speaks directly to all lands in Nevis are governed by the NIA. So I want to ask the question, can you go into the federal house, or can you cede, does the NIA has the authority to cede its authority to the federal government without a 2/3 vote? It's a constitution matter, just like Section 113. Suppose the NIA say, we're going to see this part of Section 113. You have that demands 2/3 vote in the House in the NIA. 2/3 vote, right? It would demands a referendum. You cannot change the Constitution, the federal Constitution. Whether the Spending Act in the Constitution, Section 1110, that speaks towards Nevis get proportional, pro rata, and all that. You cannot change the language of the Constitution. So I don't know, some legalese have to figure this one out, but I just don't know if the NIA can cede its authority to the federal government without, because you're moving the body of the Constitution, the spirit of the Constitution, in a different direction. That authority rests with the NIA on all land matters. Nobody else can contravene that.
Well, good thought.
I'm looking at it and I'm thinking it through. And it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, but that in itself, that in itself is something very serious, to concede the authority.
That's the point.
You know, whether or not they can do it or not, the intention is what is serious.
That's it.
Very serious. Because here we are being given the authority after a lot of ups and downs and ins and outs.
In 1983.
In 1983.
Suppose
and that legislation seems to be, to me, is not going to work on Nevis easily, okay? With a minimum of 500 acres. It's not going to, I don't see it as a workable
Cleon and I, 1 second. And think about it this way: a successive administration comes in and next term, and takes it away, and say, no, we're not going to go along with this. What happens to this entire SSC? They don't abide by it. It's because the letter of the Constitution, you understand? The federal Constitution would protect them.
Well, to be honest, it is an act of parliament, and it really cannot supersede the Constitution. And so, to say that you're conceding, I don't know if I quite agree with that. Nevertheless, as you correctly said, I mean, it's a legislative framework. What it does is that it gives both the NIA and the federal government, or the government in sync, it gives them somewhat of a scope, a legal scope, in order to be able to craft out a sustainable pathway, and that is how it is coined. But I am not sure if it is taking anything away from the constitutional right of Nigerians or from the NIA, and certainly an act of parliament really cannot do that in terms of it's the legal sense, right? But what it does is it really gives the NIA certain flexibility, in a sense, if I can use that word, in order to be able to have some kind of consensus and agreement in relation to lands, and that is designated lands or spaces within NIVIS. So it does give them that flexibility.
You're talking about the bill?
Yes, I'm talking about the bill. Sorry.
We
Yes,
pause on that. But I was trying to get that in. The bill that was passed gives NIVIS, you say, within it, some flexibility with regards to land?
With regards to the particular zone, of course, NIVIS have the flexibility. NIVIS has, based on the Constitution, the autonomy to deal with land issues.
Okay.
And that is why within the legislation you would note that if it is that the Prime Minister has certain prerogative powers, and if they designate a particular area within NIVIS for this particular special sustainability zone, they must seek the authorization, permission, consent from the NIA. They cannot permit to proceed without that consent.
Yeah, who is there that you're referring to?
I'm referring to the federal, the national parliament, the Prime Minister. It's there in the legislation that if it is that with NIVIS, lands pertaining to NIVIS now. And so what the legislation does is that it gives either the government in NIVIS or the government in Sinkits. It gives them the authority, because that is what it's a special sustainability zone authorization. So it gives them the authority in order to identify, if they see it fit, certain areas as designated areas under this legislation. Now, when it comes to NIVIS, we know that the NIA is responsible for lands based on the Constitution. So the makers of the legislation, bearing that in mind, from my understanding, bearing that in mind, drafted the legislation in such a way that the federal cabinet would have to seek the permission, so to speak, of the NIA before they can designate any lands within NIVIS under this legislation as special sustainability zones. So
yeah, go ahead. Finish up, and then I'll ask you a question.
What I'm saying, I am not sure if it is fair to say that the government in NIVIS had somewhat, for lack of a better word, I would use the word surrender, conceded any power to the federal government. I mean, people can differ with me, but I did not necessarily see that from looking at the legislation.
You know, what I find is interesting, that I've noticed over the years, is how persons who have the requisite authority to do certain things seem to abdicate that responsibility. And especially when we've been here over 3 decades on the heavyweight show and so on and so forth. And put people to try their best to explain to the public what they're supposed to do. And it keeps happening all the time. And I keep wondering whether or not these scholars and these very articulate people don't reasonably know that when certain things are done, the effect it will have. That's what I want to, let me take this. Good evening, thank you for holding. Good evening, thank you for holding. Okay, I'm very sorry, please call back. I have a copy of a statement or an address that was on this same issue. It was very interesting, and I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask the presenter, but they wouldn't answer. And it's just how the system is. Certain people who have certain authorities or seek certain positions, they're very skilled in knowing how to maneuver and how to avoid certain things. And the majority of the populace will just keep us there. And that's what's happening in this case as well. A gentleman called in, and I could understand his frustration again, but it's the way the system and the society is. He is paying a particular entity for a service, and he is so frustrated that he calls us because he isn't getting any satisfaction. About maybe 20 years ago, we had a similar issue, with one of the utilities. And that's when we found out that there is a commission and all that that's supposed to be dealing with this thing. And then found out on the program that the persons who were on the commission, most of them did not know. But there was a commission that supposed to deal with this problem. And then the leader at the time did not address it. He addressed his personal situation, and the beat goes on. So the author of this document, I would like to ask a few questions on this document, and then the other party, when I say party, I don't mean political party, but the other persons who are responsible as well, I would like to ask them some questions too. Glendale.
Yeah, there's a term called creeping normality. Creeping normality. And it's a term that that refers to when a piece of legislation is passed. It's passed in increments, and you accept this little piece of increment, it becomes normal, and another piece is passed. And now, if they can't get, let's say there's an investor now that wants 600 acres of land. They've only gotten 400 acres. And can they use eminent domain to acquire the lands?
Yeah, by the way,
with the backing of the legislation?
Let me just point out here, a part of our normal modus operandi, when one set decries this legislation, for instance, and then the turn comes, I need not go any further, right? So that's the beat goes. That's okay. And the beat goes on. So I am not, I'm saying that my concern is is the modus operandi.
Yes.
It's how we operate. It's not hammering A or B. We have to treat one another better than that. And so the people who feel that they may be criticizing now and perhaps going to gain an advantage, and then when they get there, they take pokes or whatever is involved with it, don't change a thing.
Yep.
That happens sometimes.
All the time. You mentioned to me one time it didn't happen. All the time. Is the way the game is played. Right, Cleon?
But I would like to say in particular, I've listened to Cleon position or interpretation as to the NIA and its authority surrendering, whether or not they can surrender their authority and the constitutional law. But according to what Glenn just read, on this particular legislation and the effectuation of this particular legislation, they have conceded
Correct.
the authority.
And I'm not sure they can do
Who have conceded the authority?
The island administration.
Good evening, thank you for holding. Good evening, thank you.
And I think they can.
Good evening, Webbo. Good evening to your panelists. I've been listening here and I've been making some observations.
I've heard you.
I think it's Mrs. Simmons that said that she thinks people are crying wolf. And this doesn't necessarily apply to the South Nevis investment company. I find it coincidental. The other concern is that the Premier would go to the Parliament in St. Kitts and concede Nevis people's land without even discussing it with them. That is unfortunate. Another concern is I hear, I think maybe Naya and some other folks talking about investment, foreign investment. And here is my concern. Whether these people have been approaching people for the last couple of years. And I guarantee you, they haven't paid anybody for the land yet. There's some people, they ask them to sign agreements and this and that, and I understand they're asking them to wait up until 4 years. Now, how would anybody, why would anybody sign an agreement and have to wait 4 years to get paid? In the meantime, I am understanding that you have no rights to your land after that. The Premier, at a town hall meeting, I listened, had some denial. It seemed like he was in denial. Certain things were said. All I will say is I know different. I'm hoping that these people are not getting scammed, because from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing and what I'm observing, these people don't have the money. So if they're looking for foreign investment to people who have no money, I mean, if they had money, they could pay people for the land and move on. Some people decide they're selling, some people not deciding. Even the people who decide have not been paid. Their land haven't been bought. So this is what we got to look at. I mean, everybody have their agenda. I like to listen to everybody and read between the lines. Thank you.
Caller, before you go, I can ask you a question.
Sure, I'll try and answer.
It might fall under the category of a light moment. Did you say that, for all you know, maybe these people ain't have the money?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Or you ever heard that before in regards to developments in the islands? At
Well,
the end of the day, they don't have the money.
why does the people that we put in charge keep getting scammed like this all the time?
Yeah, but what I'm asking is, you ever heard it before?
Well, what did I say? All the time.
Oh, okay. So that's it.
Why do they keep getting scammed all the time?
Okay.
We put them in charge. They're supposed to be brilliant, and they're coming to you with telling you how good this is. Take for instance geothermal, Webbo. They're trying to convince us how good geothermal is going to be, and how much money is to be made from this way, that way, the other way. But they ain't got no money. They ain't got no money to invest to bring geothermal to fruition. And my opinion is they're looking for people to invest in geothermal, and it's the people who invest the money is going to reap the benefit. Meanwhile, they think they fool us. And we continue to let them to fool us. Not making any sense. Not making any sense whatsoever. We have to put up with that. Notice how they rushed this through Parliament, and up to now nobody come to tell us anything about it or explain to us what this bill means. You're supposed to go and fight it through a legal document. Not everybody could handle it. Not everybody could handle it. And Webbo, since you're talking about light moment, I noticed the one representative that should have been able to shed some light on that on the panel tonight. That's normally there isn't. So I was just wondering. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that person is ill. That's why they're not here this evening. Anybody ever heard of any development? Not a long answer, just short. Anybody ever heard about any proposed development through the years that's supposed to happen in the islands and then didn't happen because the people didn't have any money? Glendale.
We have a myriad of them.
Not long answer, short answer.
Yes.
Oh, Cleon.
Yes.
Naya.
Yes.
Okay. So now let me take this. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for holding.
Yes. That is exactly why I use the word trust. I say I don't trust them, because there is a record of this, right? And them doing this, and a lot of development which is coming hasn't come or has fallen through. There's a record that one can point to.
So in other words, you wanted to use a big word and not just say, well, in the end they don't have the money.
The big word was what?
A record of it.
Oh, okay, if you want a record.
That's why we structure this thing this way, so that when people are getting too over anxious and excited, we get in a little moment. Sometimes they don't have no money. Yeah. Go ahead, Carla.
I wondered though, why would the premier, another big word, cede his authority to the prime minister, but at the same time said the prime minister should not make a decision without him? That seems like a very clumsy way of drafting a law. I would like Leon to explain why would they do that? You have the authority to do something, right? But you're gonna say, no, you do it, right? But don't do it unless I say you can do it. That makes sense? Just explain that for me, please.
Okay, Cleon.
Yes, I think it's definitely in keeping with the spirit of the legislation. As you know, this is a federal act. Now, when it comes to land, and because we're dealing with a land matter. Of course, Nevis has full autonomy based on the Constitution, Section 37. So, in order for the Prime Minister, in order for him to be able to identify, and that is the national parliament, in order for them to be able to identify lands within Nevis for this special economic zone, if they choose to do so. And like I said, the legislation, it is coined very broad, and I guess that is to somewhat deal with a variety of situations where we at this point sitting here, we just don't know. Well, like I said, for me, when I first heard the debate and saw the legislation, I was more thinking along the lines of geothermal. And I can see why in that regard, something like that may be a necessary mechanism, because if it is that the federal government has decided to guarantee the loan and is a part of that process when it comes to geothermal, then certainly if it is that they were able to identify, I mean collectively there must be some consensus here, it's not in isolation, that they would, if they identify this particular area for that particular purpose, then certainly I can see where they would need the consent of the NIA and why legislation may have been coined that way. Now, if it wasn't, then certainly the federal cabinet, I keep saying parliament, but cabinet or parliament, whatever it is, would not have the authority nor the autonomy to be able to identify any lands in Nevis under this particular legislation. And what would naturally have to happen then, in order for Nevis to participate in this sustainable development agenda, the NIA would then have to pass an ordinance within the Nevis Island Assembly in order to be able to deal with with that aspect. And so I think it depends. It is drafted very broadly in order to capture a variety of scenarios. So it's not just one. I didn't get the impression that it was one for one particular agenda or purpose. It's perhaps so purposes that we perhaps cannot sit here at this point in time and even think about. And so that's why I think it was coined that particular way. Whether it makes sense or not to you callers, some people may say it makes sense, some people may say it do not make sense. I noticed that a number of persons have gone into the debate as to surrendering power and conceding and consenting, but we have to remember, if it is that we are trying to come to some sort of sustainability and have some sort of consensus and some sort of mutual benefit as one federation, then there are times when we are going to have to consent, there are times when we are going to have to concede, and there are times when we are going to have to surrender in order to serve in the best interest and represent the best interests of the people. There are times when that is necessary. Consensus is not always bad. Conceding is not always bad. I mean, in recent times we have persons and leaders who believe that if they concede or if they have a consensus or if they have an agreement, it makes them look weak or it makes them powerless. I do not think that really is always the case. Sometimes you have to be mature enough to look at where you're going, look at the direction. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to move forward together. And so these are things that we definitely have to consider, and that is why I'm saying, in the absence of information, and I made that very clear, I am now charged, and most of you and the panelists here, we are charged to leave things to our own interpretation. And so it is quite unfortunate that that really is the state that we are at, where we have to interpret things for ourselves. Really and truly, something like this really should have some level of, agreement, discussion, some sort of awareness and education. Perhaps that may come at a later time. I don't know. I would call for it, and I would say, listen, for me, I like things to be transparent. I believe that we should operate with some level of openness in our space, and these are decisions that affect all of us. both those in charge as well as the people. And so there is really a need for us to have, debates and discussion and just to be aware. Once people are aware of things, then, it is a discomfort, and then it creates greater trust. And trust really is the issue than the approach that is being taken where, everything is kind of secretive. We don't know, we're speculating, we don't know who the investors are. And that type of governance, to me, it creates too much anxiety. It is not something that I would promote. It is certainly not something that I would do. If I was at the head, definitely I would have taken a very different approach. And I like to take inclusive approaches to these kind of things, because at the end of the day, it affects all stakeholders. And so I think everyone, once people are aware and they understand, especially when it is something that is new, a new model that you're trying to adopt, I think once people have the confidence in it, then it makes it easier to sell to your people.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Webbo. Webbo, Ms. Simmons just made a point, a statement, and she said that we are left to wonder. That is one of my discomfort. And the premier went and he did what he did. He went along and supported a bill that I cannot say is in the best interest of the regions. And if it is, he should have explained it to us. And he's not here to explain it. Ms. Simmons said that it's not explained. I wonder why she thinks that is. And what I'm getting from Ms. Simmons is as if it looks like she is an apologist for the legislation or for the government. And that's just how it looks. The optics is bad. Why are we here, including a trained lawyer, left to wonder and speculate? And Ms. Simmons is saying she sees nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with it.
Caller, let me stop you there. I never said that. So I would like you to be truthful in your comment. I never said that I did not see anything wrong with that. I have agitated and said that.
Why don't we do this? Miss Simmons, finish the point you're making. Caller, after she's finished, you respond.
No, caller, I think you're misconstruing what I said. I never said that I didn't see anything wrong with it. As a matter of fact, if you were listening, I just said that is not an approach that I would have taken personally. I do believe that there should be transparency and there should be openness and education and awareness. But I just went on to explain because I was asked a particular question from a legal standpoint as to why this was done a particular way. So I do not want you to say that I said that I didn't see anything wrong with it. I have said all night that I can understand and appreciate persons' anxiety and fear because it is trenching really into the unknown, and perhaps if we were more prepared and we had more information, people would have been more confident in what the government is trying to achieve.
Okay, caller.
And that is my position.
So, caller, that's her explanation.
Yes, I got that. But I'm not understanding. And the question I was asking is, why do you think they did it that way? You're the legal man on the program tonight, and I'm asking, why do you think they did it that way? I'm just asking for your thoughts.
Caller, I do not know why they did it that way. That is the way they chose to do it. What I can say is that I would not have done it that way. But as to why they did it that way, I cannot tell you that I know, and I don't think that there is any legal interpretation that is required here.
So you see our dilemma.
Okay. All right, caller.
You see, just a minute, Webbo. I'm not going to ask any similar. Do you see our dilemma? Do you see our difficulty?
I can see your difficulty. I can understand and appreciate the anxiety, but my position is that sometimes, in the absence of education awareness, sometimes we have to understand that it is not always all negative. There can be some good. Sometimes there's method in the madness. I don't know.
That is why I said it sounds like you're an apologist for the government.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion, quite frankly speaking.
Okay.
Well, the government, somebody's going to have to come forward, Webbo, and my panelists. I don't know. I mean,
But they will.
This is the,
They will. This
Okay.
is the normal way things work. If I said it once, I said it a dozen times for the evening. Most of the things operate that way, where people are wondering how it is, and then the opposition will criticize, and so on and so forth. And then when the opposition becomes the government, then they don't say anything wrong with it. It's the norm. Not correct, Glendale?
Yeah, and the beat goes on.
Not not correct, Cleon? Not correct?
That's the practice.
Okay, Naya?
In true, Webbo,
Naya? Not correct?
sometimes you're correct. Sometimes it's correct.
No, and what I'm talking about this time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But Webbo, what is there to be explained, really? Or anyone, you guys, what is there to be explained? What is left to be explained?
Well,
to the public, really.
Well, first of all, what they can do, in my opinion, is start with the piece of legislation, explain what the intent is, as Cleon keeps saying, the spirit is, and then we can get to the next part, which is the investor and what Nevis would look like, and what they think, thought is as it relates to this law, and how is it going to transform.
Do you
One last thing,
the Prime Minister did a good job introducing the legislation?
Absolutely not.
I think that's part of the problem. Because I'm yet to really. I'm waiting for an explanation about it, because I don't know what is there to explain.
Before you go so fast, the Prime Minister did not do a good job, and the Premier certainly did not do a good job, and they're tied to each other throughout the legislation. It's always referred to as the Prime Minister and the Premier throughout the piece of legislation. Most references is the Prime Minister and the Premier all the way through. So they both have a responsibility, I think, to come to the public. This needs a clear airing, and make it so it makes sense. As it is right now, we don't think it makes sense for the most part. I don't think the general public does. I don't think the people who are asked to sell does. And that's why if they were suggesting the southern part of the island, because that has always been the suggestion.
So let's forget about the southern part. Let's just think of any part.
Any part. And as Cleon said, how do you convince someone to sell without informing them as to what you're going to do with the lands? I think she said that earlier. People, if it's for a purpose that they can see that it's, people may relent, that is gainful to the country and gainful, to the larger good, the greater good. But as it is right now, everything is held in a vacuous way, empty, and nobody really knows what's next. And it's left to interpretation, and interpretation has not been pretty for the most part.
Well, Mr. Herbert, if I may, there are some persons who have said publicly that they have entered into agreements and they have signed off, and they have not really asked these questions. And so, again, because it is somewhat a private nature, and it's private lands we're talking about, of course, respectfully, people are free to negotiate when it comes to the sale of their lands. They are free to do so.
Could I ask a question? You're the legally on the panel, and I as well, to a lesser extent in terms of practice. But can you, once you pass this legislation and you want to do development, and government is doing a partnership development such as these developers, can they now move towards acquisition of lands, meaning eminent domain? Is that possible once that piece of legislation is gazetted? Can eminent domain step in, meaning you can take the public lands? That's what I'm trying to say.
You can take private lands.
Yeah, the private lands I meant. The private, people's lands.
Of course you can.
So those who are slow to sell.
It is indeed risky. The approach really has been one of trying to get some level of consensus, and I have to be careful how I coin my words here because people seem to be taking sides, and I don't want to be caught up. One person said, I am apologizing on behalf of the government. I am an independent thinker, independent person. I can look at things with a balanced view without any hidden agendas. But I do believe that within this particular context and looking at the spirit of the legislation, that approach is not something that I am getting from the spirit of the legislation. I'm getting a sense that there must be consent and consensus. Because at the end of the day, if you were to tie this in, and the whole purpose of this legislation is in keeping with sustainable development, and the approach so far, based on the UN agenda, has not been one of arbitrary approach. It has been one of more consensus and looking, to better serve the people, to advance for economic purposes, environmental purposes, and all of those things. So I am not really getting, that inclination from this particular piece of legislation. Of course, we do have a Land Acquisition Act where the government can acquire, certain properties based on a public interest. But that is all that mechanism is already in place. It already exists. But for this particular purpose, I am not really getting that sense. Of course, people are concerned. What if I don't sell? Will they be able to take my land? It is within your rights not to sell. What I would say, though, Glendale, 1 minute, is that I note from public discussion that a number of persons have said that they feel that they are being harassed, so to speak, in order to sell their lands, and that is something that I think if that is being done, it is unfortunate, and it should not happen where our people feel that they should be harassed in any way, intimidated in any way to sell their lands if they don't want to sell them. And that is why I go back to the point that I made earlier. Awareness, education, consultation, having frank and open and transparent discussion would put a lot of people at ease, and it would actually help in terms of the marketing strategy and even perhaps in terms of the sales. Do
you have any concerns, Naya and Cleon, of the fact that the legislation speaks towards the seabed lease? They can do as many seabed lease in terms of up to 99 years and beyond. It directly speaks to that. So it gives you a view, it gives you a vision of marinas.
Let me just take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, just one.
Hello? Hello? Okay, it's not seeming to be there. Go ahead.
Yeah, it gives you a vision of marinas to come as a part of this whole thing. And you know what comes with marinas? Yachts. And you know what comes with all that stuff. So again, there are major concerns here.
This is the first time you heard about marinas coming to St. Kitts and Nevis?
No, man. Again, Webbo, you're right. We've been hearing them coming all along.
So then what's the big deal now?
Of course. As they say, investors are always coming.
No, walk with me. You.
Like moment.
That's a serious moment there. Because anyway, go ahead.
Well, 99 years lease. It also shows a long-term permanence,
Oh, yeah.
It makes one think about beachfront.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of nature of business. But I think, as Cleon said, the legislation is quite open. to various call-ins, I suppose, circumstances, and businesses, I suppose. But it tends to make us feel like it's that type of thing that's related to probably the hotel industry, you know. And if we think of Nevis, so small, you know, it wouldn't be up in the hills, but on the shoreline, in some way or the other. And of course, with the 99 years lease on, you know, the seabed and all that, you know, and so I do wonder if Nevis can really facilitate this legislation, to be quite honest, you know, and that's where I'm at with it. A lot of people talking about explanation, but I still don't understand what the explanation would be like. Maybe because I am able to probably have my own interpretation of the, and if we believe the Premier that there is nothing formal coming, then this is just what can we say it is? A framework. Albeit to some extent a dangerous framework.
So and
we hope not.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Webbo. Good evening to your panel. Very interesting. 19-year leases. We've seen them broken in Nevis, time and time again. Anyway, let me just say what I wanted to say. My father always told me, make it make sense to you. One of the things that has happened with the approach of the purchasing of the land in the Southeast Peninsula is that you're invited to have a conversation with the investors. That's set up by the persons who are doing the groundwork here in the ground. And when the question is asked, let me put it this way. When I ask the question, what is the investment? What are you proposing to do with these lands? And that question was never answered. That was a red flag for me. We're going to be talking about this for a long time. It's very, very unfortunate that this bill ended up in the House in St. Kitts. And the leaders in Nevis never thought that it was important to have a town hall meeting to discuss something as serious as this to Nevisians, so we understand what it's all about, why it's happening, and where we're going with this.
I could ask you a question?
Certainly.
The bill you're referring to affects St. Kitts and affects Nevis? I'm asking. Or it just affects Nevis?
My understanding is it affects St. Kitts and Nevis.
Okay. There was no discussion with the people of Nevis from the leaders of Nevis, correct?
I've not heard of any.
Okay.
Have you?
No.
Okay.
Do we know whether or not there were any discussions with the people of St. Kitts by the leaders of St. Kitts?
No, I haven't heard of any, but honestly, I really don't care.
Okay.
About the St. Kitts part of it.
Okay.
My concern is when things that are this...
No, work with me. I asked a question only by way of getting information since you brought it up. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, that was my point.
Oh, okay.
We should not be having this conversation, or this conversation should not be coming up with so many questions at this point, since it has already happened. These are some of the questions and discussions that should have happened long before a bill was ever put in place.
One more question, caller. Do you also agree that is over the years, the modus operandi of us as a people?
Yes, but you know what? There's something called change.
Right. Okay. Thank you
And
very much. Yeah. Yes.
It's long overdue.
Right.
Change is long overdue.
So it's time to change now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Have a good night.
You as well. Thank you. Who's got the last word? Nobody wants the last word?
And the beat goes on, Webbo. Nothing changed. It will continue to be this way, disrespect to the people. And I do believe that we have to change that and begin to hold our leaders and people accountable, more accountable. We should demand more, and we should at least get that level of respect and accountability coming from them.
Glendale Herbert, Cleone Stapleton Simmons, Conrad Nye Libert. Thank you all very much. This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On the Mark. Join Keith Scarborough on Thursday evening at 8 o'clock for Government at Work, a place where you can spend all of your evenings here in the Eastern Caribbean Spa House. Thank you all again for joining us, your voice in the community, thought that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited